Hey everybody, it's Kathy Klotz-Guest with the Story DNA podcast. My partner in crime, Brian Carter, is not here today. He's on a plane. And I'm really excited today because, well, all our episodes have been great. We get to talk to amazing people that do great work in the world of storytelling. And as part of our podcast and research for our book, we get to talk to very cool people like today's guest, who's been incredibly patient. I'll give you the backstory in a second, but let me introduce her. We have Finnegan Dowling, who is the social media manager for the Humane Society of Silicon Valley. And she and her team were responsible for the Eddie the Terrible campaign, which I love, love, love. And if you're not familiar with it, I've written about it on my blog. You can also Google it. Please take a look at it. It was a great campaign that did incredibly well for the Humane Society. And I'm actually seeing that model being replicated in Instagram, for the Humane Society in Utah. I'm seeing all kinds of people latch onto a lot of the great work that this group did. So welcome to Story DNA, Finnegan.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. And I'm glad to know that miserable dogs have become like a nationwide phenomenon.
Well, why should people be the only ones miserable, right? We can commiserate.
Exactly.
And I got to say thank you to our guest today because she was so patient. We just had a lot of Google issues setting up. But you know what? We got through it. She's here, and I could not be more excited. So let's jump on in.
All right, let's do it.
I know you've answered this question probably so many times since this campaign happened, I think at the end of 2014, if I remember correctly. How did you and your team come up with this? What prompted this as sort of the basis for a story?
We had... It was very funny because it was not just the marketing team. We had Eddie the Terrible in our possession for 2 years, and he had actually been in foster homes. And we always look at who's been here the longest, and we had sort of a war room meeting about Eddie, where we're like, what can we do with Eddie? Mm-hmm. And it was not just marketing; it was our adoptions department, the foster department, and the behavior department. And we all sat down and we're like, well, he's kind of a miserable dog. He's great with the people that he loves, but how do we adopt out a dog like this without, there's no way to sugarcoat this and have people come in and really be disappointed. Yeah. And he was such a funny guy because he was a cool dog, even if he was kind of a jerk, that we just decided, like, what if we just tell the truth? And what if we just blow it out in terms of telling the truth and actually exaggerate all of his flaws so absolutely nobody can say that they do not know what they're getting into? And we ran with that. We just went with it. And we have, it was a huge team effort. We had a volunteer photographer named Jackie McMillan, who did all of the photos for him. And then Lori Calvary, our designer, put together those hysterical Nightmare on Ames Avenue memes for him. And then Elizabeth Laverty, who is, she's like almost a full-time volunteer. She's awesome. And she made the videos, the adopting bad videos. And we just decided that not only would we do it, we would just make it our focus. We would, sort of push everything off the table and get Eddie out of here by telling people the truth.
Well, and it was so funny because I think what captured my imagination, I remember being at a conference back in 2014, and people were talking about it, and the likes of Ann Handley at Marketing Prof, she's like, oh my gosh, Kathy, have you heard about? Have you seen this campaign? And it was just incredible. I think the genius of likening Eddie to Walter and Breaking Bad was genius. And because even though you go, my God, he's kind of a jerk, there's something redemptive. Everybody and every animal has some redeeming quality. They're not 100% bad. And I thought that was so anthropomorphic and actually poetic and cool. And the little devil horns that you guys had. It just captured, I think, such the hearts and minds of the readers.
The thing with Eddie too is he was sort of like Walter from Breaking Bad in that he was so smart and he just needed the right place to channel it. And the funniest thing about the Eddie story, just to go here, is that he's now a certified therapy dog for his adopter.
Wow.
And I tell people that, and they're completely positive that I'm lying about that. And I'm like, if I wouldn't lie about the fact that the dog probably is going to bite somebody, I wouldn't lie about him being a therapy dog.
Well, and that was such the genius of the campaign, is I've never seen in my life such amazing honesty. Like, if you could just, if you were on eBay and you were buying a product, forget about a sentient, being, but if you were buying a product and you actually got the honest backstory, it's like, yeah, you probably don't want to buy this thing. I mean, this thing has been thrown around, tossed, beaten, whatever, a bunch of times. But there's something about the Eddie story that I think speaks to redemption for everybody. Silly, it may sound silly, but if you really think about it, everybody can relate to Eddie, because we've all done stuff that, okay, maybe we shouldn't have done that. And that doesn't mean we don't deserve a second chance. And I think there was something, when I look at that story, I love the purity of, I saw a redemption story. I thought, everybody deserves a second chance. And we don't know what happened to Eddie. I mean, Eddie may be a little bit of a jerk, but he may be justified because he might have been abused. We don't know. And I thought, it's interesting how we put the human thing on that story, don't we?
Yeah. The two things I learned from Eddie is, number one, everybody's dog is a jerk. And that was what, like, the minute we put that up, everybody's like, this sounds just like my little Mr. Muffin Pants. And like everybody, and we got all of these fantastic stories of people's terrible pets. And I can contribute. My dog is afraid of her own water bowl. My puppy is probably busy shredding my underwear right now at home. Yeah. And so I can relate. And I think too, that was part of it, is that everybody could relate to it. And I think the other magic of Eddie is that we're very used to this paradigm with shelter storytelling that starts with a horror story, goes to you feeling bad, and then ends with either like a plea for a check or asking you to take home an animal because you feel sorry for it. Yeah. And this was a totally different story. Eddie probably wasn't abused. We have an idea who his owners were, and they were just overwhelmed. At no point in it did we ever want people to feel guilty or bad or anything. And I think that's why people engaged with it. Cause like, I'm not, you see that Sarah McLachlan ad and it ruins your day. Yeah. And people want to feel good. And Eddie made people laugh. And I think that's a huge thing. And it was so out of left field.
Was so optimistic. You actually related. You did relate to Eddie. And I have a lab, and my lab is sometimes a jerk, and he was pretty angry at the neighbors because the neighbors weren't, would yell at him, and we'd go for walks, and he'd kind of go on their lawn, and he'd kind of yell at us. And so one day my lab, we call him the juvenile dog delinquent, and he walked over there and he just did his business right on the neighbor's front porch. I mean, he was not having it, and I was like,
right on the porch. Right on the porch.
Right on the porch, and I was like,
keeping it classy.
Let's not go there. And be like, hey, lady, I got a bone to pick with these people. And he wasn't having it. And you hit it, you nailed it. I mean, everybody's got a little bit of a jerky dog. And again, I mean, I have those days. I'm like, I've been tempted. We've all had those days where it's just not clicking for us. And that doesn't mean we don't have great qualities. And can't be redeemed. It's such a wonderful story. Have you seen? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I can definitely relate to Eddie because I'm not a jerk. I'm just not very great socially, but I'm really loyal. And so there was a little bit of Eddie in me, which is why like writing the blog was really easy, because I'm like, well, his social skills aren't fantastic, but he's loyal, so he's got that going for him. Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's something about, and it's really interesting that there's something about this whole campaign, and you alluded to it earlier, and you talked about what you learned about people, and we all relate. There's something about animals that can teach us a lot about ourselves and marketing. And I think some of the best lessons I've seen from the last year have used animals in a campaign. Maybe not the Eddie the Terrible campaign, but I think there's something about, you just said, we all have qualities that are animal-like, and animals have human qualities in a lot of ways. Are you familiar? Have you seen the other campaigns out there that have sort of, I think, launched off of your innovation?
We're sort of a close-knit group, our animal social media people, and I've been told that people were doing stuff similar to him, but I've never seen it, and I'm always like, you go, like if it'll get a dog that has been a long-term resident or a cat that's a long-term resident out of there, call him Satan, like do it, take what you need if it gets them a home. So
Yeah.
we're pretty all for one when it comes to this field, which is really cool. So
it actually really is. There was an Instagram campaign that was done in Utah by the Humane Society out there, and it was actually pretty compelling. And it was you can think of it like Match.com for dogs and owners.
Yes.
And they did these really great pics, and it just was comical because it highlighted the personalities of the dogs. And you could just look and you could see the animal personalities, and it was actually pretty extraordinary.
That the woman who does that, I know her, and actually we met because of Eddie via like online. Like I said, I'm not great socially. And her name's Genevieve Schuster, and she does one of the most amazing jobs of pictorial storytelling I've ever seen with her photo booth shots, where if you look at them, like you can literally see the dog react to different things. And it's almost like she does tell like a little story in that fourplex. She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. She has a book coming out. She's awesome. So
no doubt. Where do you guys go next? I mean, that's such an amazing thing to do. And I think when you have a major innovation in a campaign like that, it's so great to see. How do you have a second act, or what do you do?
It's funny because we've had a couple of other things. Eddie the Terrible, I'm sure we'll get another dog that's equally awful. We have a couple cats that are sort of vying for the title right now. I don't know that we can ever top it, but I know like there's two really smart things that happen at my organization that I think I make all the difference in the world. Number one, aside from our director, none of us are marketers. I went to school for journalism. And so when you talk about storytelling, I think I probably see the world more in terms of stories. And that was what Carol Novella, who is our president, when she put me in this spot, what she wanted was something called the story engine, where I'm in the shelter every day looking at who's here and what their stories are and what's going on. And as a result of that, like, working in a shelter is like working in a soap opera. There will always be another great story. When we had kittens, we did sort of an over-the-top campaign about kitten rental, where we likened it to car rental, and it really upset some people, but it brought in a ton of foster parents, and it started a great conversation where people were talking about kitten fostering, where it's like, oh my God, we've been trying to get people to talk about this for years. Wow. And I think that's where we go from there, is not just telling the stories of the animals in a different way that's positive and that makes you want to keep looking and keep coming back to it, but also trying to start conversations around things and being willing to kind of take risks with that sort of thing.
I think that's one of and listening to you, I mean, it makes so much sense, because a couple of things that really struck me about this campaign was the optimism. And you mentioned, we laughed at the Sarah McLachlan ads, but they do make you feel like, oh my God, you're crying and you're like, oh, this world is horrible. And the guilt, and people want they want to feel good about something. And I think the campaign clearly did that. And I love that you said you focused on story and that you have a background in journalism. And that warms my storytelling heart, because I think everybody is so hung up on going viral and amplifying their message, but they don't necessarily pay attention to the underlying story. And what I loved about your campaign, and I appreciate it, is I was like, this is a hell of a story. This is fun. And this is a great story. And you've got amazing protagonists in this jerk, and this jerky little dog that you're all getting for.
It was sort of like an HBO series where you have like the hero that's not quite good, but not quite bad.
Not quite bad. He's Walter. He's and everybody has a little bit of that in him. And I think that was
exactly.
And I love the fact that it wasn't perfect. Reality isn't perfect. And we don't need to say this dog is so wonderful and it's so great, because that's probably not the truth. And your ability to just tell it straight was so great.
Well, and it dishonors the animal too.
Yeah.
You know, it's not my goal to make people feel sorry for our animals.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody should want to go home with somebody that feels bad for them. I don't think that's a good goal, you know, be it another person or an animal. Like, going home with somebody because they pity you is not a place to be for an animal or a person or anything.
Yeah.
And I think that that was one of the things we were trying really, you know, we try with all of our media, is to make sure that we let people see who these animals are and who they're going to be living with. You know, to tell people an animal's a victim, that doesn't tell them what their day-to-day life is. It just makes them feel like they should change the channel, you know?
Yeah.
So,
what surprised you most about this campaign?
How terrible the Publix dogs were. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was basically, you know, two things. The first thing was just the absolute shock, like the Shorty Award, all of that. Like, we had no idea. I remember walking out of the meeting with everybody that was in the meeting, and we were joking. We're like, oh, we're going to make some noise, meaning, you know, we're going to get the dog adopted. And the next thing we know is we have Inside Edition on our front doorstep, which was amazing. But so aside from that, like, earth-shattering, shocking phenomenon, a lot of it was just confirmed something that I've been in shelters for 20 years, and I've had this lurking suspicion that deep down people are good, and deep down people, if you give them all the information, you don't have to be perfect to get adopted, and you don't have to be pathetic to be adopted. And the fact, the huge outpouring of support, where we had people wanting to ship him to Great Britain, we had people that were going to fly from another part of the country to meet him, and most of all, we had, you know, 1 million people going, "Go Eddie, go Eddie, go Eddie," and just how much it reaffirmed sort of this wing and a prayer idea of let's market our shelter like people are good and our animals are good, because that's what we firmly believe. Well, not always good, obviously, but you know what I'm saying. You know, that our animals are as doggy as everybody's dogs are.
Absolutely. There's nothing more human than being doggy. We all have doggy in us.
Yes. We all aspire to be our dogs. So we all aspire to be our dogs.
I think that's true. On a good day, my lab buddy is a better human being than I am, and because he's so loving and most days just unconditionally and loyal. Yeah.
I want to take stress relief classes from my dogs, because you can like take the food bowl away and their foreheads wrinkle up, and then 5 minutes or later they're like, oh, tennis ball, it works. You know. So
kids are like that. We talked about the war room, and I love that you actually do this kind of triage thing for the animals that need that are having trouble being adopted. How else Finnegan, do you guys mine for ideas, for story ideas, and not worry about, you know, social media? Because I'm with you, that comes later. But how do you find the great stories there?
You know, I think one of the biggest mistakes since Eddie broke, I've sort of gotten like an ice bath in marketing in a lot of ways. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I hear other people making is how siloed their organizations are, where marketing is over here and they might talk to the top 5 people from each department about what they want marketed. But that's every day I'm walking the shelter. Everybody in our department is walking the shelter. I spend a substantial amount of time back in our medical wards. And we, you know, it's just a matter of talking to people, because not only are the animals the stories, but the people are the stories as well. And if you go back and you talk to people, and I'm lucky because everybody I work with is phenomenally cool and enormously dedicated to what we do here. If you go back and you talk to people, and what you find is everybody here is as excited as we are, And so my cube, which I'm not in right now because I borrowed my boss's office, is constantly like a traffic spot where people from, you know, the doctors, the vets will stop by and be like, get the camera, I've got this great dog that just came in. And receiving will come up and say, we just got this litter of animals in from this situation. And, you know, and so it's just the fact that everybody is working towards the same goal, and everybody has really bought into our organization, has really bought into the idea of storytelling and of telling these stories. And that's how I think we keep it real. But I am out on the floor every single day, and I'm in our database and looking at intake lists and that sort of thing.
I love that you say that you're walking around. I think that's such an important thing, because I think you do have an advantage not coming from marketing. I think marketing can get siloed. And I think, well, you said it so well. I couldn't say it better. But get out and walk around. Talk to the people who are closest to the customer. Talk to the customers. And
talk to the people that do the frontline work. You know, I love stories in general. I'm a huge reader. I'm a huge NPR podcast geek. This American Life, all of that. My geek horns are poking out.
Hey, me too.
And I'm always, mine are hitting the ceiling. And I'm always like, when you imbibe a lot, when you take in a lot of stories, you start to see stories everywhere. And to that extent, like, I think that's really cool too, is that we do walk around, and instead of saying, is this a sale? How would we sell this animal? We would say, what's its story? You know, like, where did it come from? Where is it going? You know, how did it wind up here? What has it done since it's here?
Yeah, it's that backstory. And I really love that you talked about the people on the front lines, because I've often believed, and I've said, that the best storytellers in any organization they're usually not the executives. Not that you can't have great executive storytellers, you can, and you need them to champion storytelling as a cultural thing. However, the people that are on the front line of servicing the customers, that hear the stories and the pain points of the customers directly, they're going to know, they're going to have the best stories. And let them talk. Let them talk. Yeah.
And they know what people, when they walk in the door, are saying. They, you know, you can have all the data in the world about potential pinch points for an animal, a hard drive, whatever it is that you are marketing, but data points don't touch anything if it doesn't touch the fact that 60% of the people, when they're walking in the door, are saying, I don't know how to turn it on, or, you know, I don't want a dog that sheds, or, you know, that sort of thing. So you have to be really, you know, where they are if you talk to the people that hear it. So, because even data collection is a slippery slope too. So.
And how did you, I'm just curious, because in a world with so much noise and so many stories, and it's I think your point's right. It's not that people don't care. I think people do care. There's just so much competing for attention. How did you help this story stand out, and how did you seed it with social media to kind of get it started?
We built an entire package. There was a whole package when we decided to do it. And again, it wasn't just marketing, it was adoptions, it was behavior, it was our foster parent people that were in there. We decided when we went for the full court press is that we would try to seed it with images for every single channel that we were on that would all lead back to one point, the blog. And then from there, grab it. So we needed to look at making sort of, you know, packages or images or whatever. Like for Instagram, we had the memes that Lori Calvary did, the Adopting Bad, the Nightmare on Ames Avenue, which is still my favorite. The Walking Ed was one of them. And we put those up, and then we made him a Pinterest board. We tried to create these sort of flashpoint images that would make you want to know why the Walking Dead staff was walking a Chihuahua. The Walking Dead crowd, you know, like we seeded those across all of the photo and, you know, photo channels, as well as Twitter. And then we did a Facebook post. And then once you got to the Facebook post, we also had the videos that Elizabeth Laverty had that were just amazing. Like they were just, and God bless her, she's a volunteer. And I was sitting in her kitchen on Thanksgiving morning talking about terrible chihuahuas, and she was completely in. And she just immediately got to work on that. But the idea was that you would have one thing. If you just show a picture of a dog, well, that's great. You know, put in hashtag dog on Instagram and you're going to get a million photos. And so the question was, how do we make this so drastically shocking and different that you need to see what this story is?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But, and that's how we did it. But
no, it all came together. I love how all the pieces coalesced. What are some of the big things that, you know, we talk a little bit about story, and going back to how you folks mine for stories. What advice would you give to businesses from some of the things that your team learned from this whole thing? Where would you tell people to start? If they've got a conundrum, they've got a product that's not selling, probably coming at it the wrong way, where would you advise them to start to look at the story differently?
The first thing I would tell them to do is to, as you said, mine for stories, and go talk to the clients and go talk to the people that are selling the product, and go talk to them. Because the thing is whenever you have something that's difficult or challenging, you have to give people a friendly in to it. You know, like when you write, you have to have an intro that will make people want to read more. And, you know, look for something that's not intuitive. And for God's sakes, don't look at what other people are doing. Like, you know, talk to the people that are selling it, and maybe start with something that's not the product. Maybe start with something where the product was the solution. I just finished a great book called The Secret History of Wonder Woman by Jill Lepore. I have absolutely no interest in Wonder Woman. I have absolutely no interest in comic books. But she actually stumbled onto the story of the gentleman who wrote that. And by using that man's story, she actually made me go read Wonder Woman comic books, because I was so fascinated by the story of the person that produced it. And if you can give people a sympathetic in, a lot of times they will try to find out more. They will give you the benefit of the doubt, and they'll trust you to listen just a little bit longer. If you can make it human or real or relatable, you know. Yeah. So that would be my first thing, is look for stories in all the wrong places. You know, look for stories look for stories in the 19-year-old girl in the call center that is answering the calls. You know, start from there. You know, ask her how she wound up answering calls. Talk to one of the clients and ask them how they found themselves in the job that they're in now, and just try to find a way back to what you're trying to get to.
I love that answer, because the best stories are just never about your product head on directly. They're just a more human way to think about your customers' needs. And, you know, they don't live to buy your products or adopt your animals. They've got their own needs and issues and worries. Can you tap into something human and empathetic there? And that's such a great way to think about it, you know. I love that.
You know, go ahead.
Oh no, absolutely, go ahead.
Well, you know, I think when you go to buy a car, a lot of it depends on whether or not you like the person selling you the car, or if you relate to that, or if you go to buy anything, there are companies that maybe aren't selling the cheapest or most economical or even most practical products, but we buy them because we like them. Ben & Jerry's comes in such small containers, but they're such kind of cool guys that we feel good spending that much on that little ice cream. You know, like you can get to that. So
no, it's so true. I was just chatting with somebody who just finished a book, and you know, we talk about like the Tom Shoes thing, you know, Tom Shoes. I love Tom Shoes, and I don't know, then again, if you ever buy Tom Shoes, but I buy them, and they're not the best shoes out there. And I've said it, they're not the most beautiful shoes out there, but it's really not about the shoes. It's about the larger movement behind it and what it means to be part of that. And I think they've done such a good job tapping into that and finding the best in sort of a social cause and nonprofit movement, but making it a for-profit entity.
Yes.
And they've just merged the two in a way that has a really compelling story.
And I think I definitely agree with you. I have to admit, we're a Vans family. There's an awful lot of skate shoes that go on at my house. But
I like Vans too.
But it is. Yeah, it's a little embarrassing if you open a closet at our house. But because like I'm 40, and it's just like, oh yeah, I still wear 12-year-old boy skater shoes, but I'm okay with that. But anyway, like I completely agree. And I think Eddie has a lot to say to that, because California, and you know this because you're in San Jose, suffers from a glut of tan chihuahuas. You cannot bend over, you can't turn around without tripping over a small tan dog in this state. And the majority of them are actually awesome dogs, but there was something about allowing people to relate to Eddie, and whose name is now Teddy, and allowing people like sort of a very sympathetic that didn't sound like anything else, that sort of made people feel good about buying into tan chihuahuaism, which is usually something that we struggle with a lot here. So.
No, it's true. You can't.
Probably the first.
You go to a dog park and it's just like, it's comical and it's true. I love that you said, don't look at what everybody else is doing. I think that's so right. We're all looking for the template. We're waiting for somebody to come up with the formula or the template that we just emulate. And that's such a disservice. Yeah. It's a disservice to finding original ideas, which you folks did. And I'm wondering, if we just suspend that for a minute, is there anybody out there that, your team looks at and goes, they're doing really innovative work that's inspiring because it's optimistic, it makes people feel good, and it's just another way to tell that story?
There are so many great ones that are, that I see that are inspiring. I forget, I want to say it was Pets Alive Austin did a wonderful thing with last year, where they did something called dog bombing or mutt bombing, where they took celebrities' Instagram photos and photoshopped one of their mutts into it, one of their available dogs, and then reposted it on Instagram with the person tagged and a message from the dog. And it was so off the wall. And if you look up mutt bombing, you will be laughing for hours. And that to me was incredibly inspirational. I think it's the Shelter Dog Project or the Animal Shelter the shelter. They do these great ads called "It's Not Their Fault" that again tell the stories of how a lot of animals come to shelters, but tell them in a really funny, empowering way. Like the dog that gets thrown out of the car but manages to steal the guy's wallet while he's being dumped, and that's great. And then on a less again, Humane Society of Utah, their imagery, just so beautiful, like such a different way of not banking on pity, not doing that, but just really selling the animals as who they are and making sure that you see who they are through their photos. I just saw something amazing from, I think it was Humane Society of Calgary, where they had a cat adoption event, and they made a really cheesy used car salesman ad. But instead of cars, it was cats, and they had the guy in the cheap suit going, "Cats, cats, cats, cats," and it was amazing, and it was so funny, and it totally made you want to go in. So there's a lot of really good stuff happening out there. So
that's great. I'm always inspired at what I see out there. There's some very creative people out there like yourself doing some really cool stuff. And my husband and I talked about it, and he wants to see the baseball cards of animals, like they're stats, like trading cards. Like if he can merge, because my husband's such a baseball nut and he loves animals. He's like, if you could find merge like baseball trading cards with animals, that would be super cool.
That would actually be genius. I actually think that's I know that there's some place that does it with police dogs, where you can buy the police dog trading cards, and they have all of them. But I might steal your husband's idea,
Go
honestly.
for
If
it.
anybody
No.
wants to, if any trading card company wants to kick down for some cards, we could definitely have some amazing stats on it. So
I would love to see that. So steal away, because if that could come to fruition to help some animals, I think that would be super awesome. Plus, my husband would be happy, with the baseball thing. So it would serve a lot of needs.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah.
Everybody wins.
Because then you could take them and I could give them to your husband and he could go scatter them at baseball games because people would pick them up and look.
They would.
There you go.
There's family, and there's families that go to those things, and it's interesting. And I don't know, I suspect a lot of times, and I don't know this to be true, but I suspect a lot of women are sort of kind of key decision makers in pet adoption more than men. Now, that could be completely just my perception based on sort of my situation and people that I know, friends of mine. But I think if there's a way to get, more men involved in something that they love, and to help spread awareness at a sporting event, which is can be a family-oriented thing anyway, I'm all for it. So,
Yeah, definitely. And that's a lot of people who will actually go to a game are athletic people who would do wonderfully with like some of our higher energy dogs. Like if you would like to throw a ball at home like your hero does on the field, I've got a buddy for you that will be right there to catch it,
Yeah.
So you could totally make it work. So totally make it.
I think that'd be great. And you converted my husband, because my husband's more of a cat person. And I can't do cats. I'm allergic. So when he saw I was showing him the Eddie the Terrible campaign, and I just never seen him crack up so hard. And he just fell in love. And he's he just fell in love. He's like, well, Eddie the Terrible sounds like my kind of dog. I'm like, you are a dog person. See, it made him recognize that deep down he was actually a dog person, because he actually could totally relate to Eddie.
Eddie. It was funny because like any whatever good marketer, I immediately tried to ride that train as long as I could until we tried to use it to sort of glide some other animals out of here. So our blog entry after Eddie the Terrible was, I believe, 4 dogs that are kind of crappy too, was the title of the blog. One of those dogs and none of them were crappy, but they were all just sort of quirky dogs. And one of them was actually, as far as we could tell, a cat trapped in a dog's body. Like it was the most cat-like dog we had ever met in our lives. Where it liked attention well enough, but it was perfectly content to sort of hang out by itself. And it wasn't going to be, like jumping on everybody that walked in the house. It liked you well enough. It just wasn't going to get terribly excited over anything. So,
yeah. I have to sort of ask this question. We didn't at the beginning, but one of the things in researching storytelling for this book, we asked people, what's your definition of story? And has it changed after this campaign? So I would ask you, what's your definition of story? And how did it maybe evolve after this campaign?
Oh, wow.
Kind of a meta question.
Wow. Oh man, you should have emailed me this one ahead of time.
Yeah.
Didn't see this coming. So I'll start with how it evolved. Prior to this, I thought a story had to be something with beginning, middle, end. Even if the end was good or bad or inconclusive, there still had to be an end. The one thing Eddie taught me is that there's a reason we love choose your own adventure books as kids. That if you empower people to change the story, that it's okay to leave it dangling. If you are trying to market anything, be it a dog, a widget, or whatever, it's perfectly okay to say, not really sure where this is going to end, but why don't you help us, find that where this is going. And so that definitely sort of blew my liberal arts education out of the water, where, like conclusion, blah, blah, blah. So in terms of that, that's how my concept of story changed, was that it's perfectly okay to say, we don't really have an ending. It's still a story. Why don't you come in and help us finish it? And a story can be something that is told by more than one person at the same time. Everybody was talking about Eddie, and that conversation became a story in and of itself. What is a story now? well, how do I define a story? That's so funny because I totally consider myself somebody that loves stories. It is a narrative trajectory that draws you into it. It is, and when I say narrative trajectory, it sounds way more like complicated and jargony, but basically I have to somehow account for the fact that I no longer have to have an end to it, that it can just go. But it is somehow a narrative that pulls you in one way or another, which means any sort of narrative. A conversation can be a narrative, but again, a conversation can be a story in and of itself. If you have a couple of hours and want to be terribly bored, watch My Dinner with Andre, that movie that's just two guys having a conversation, because it's definitely a story. It's not, you know, but it is a conversation. I'm not sure how much sense that made, but I hacked away at that question. So
it's a great question, and it was a great answer.
It's a great question. The answer was the problem.
No, the answer was incredible. The answer was great, and I think I always love asking that, because I think, you know, in the work that I've done, I sort of arrived at a similar place where I had a 180 degree. I was always taught the same thing you were. Because I have a communication and journalism background, that it is beginning, middle, end, and you have your rising and cresting action, you have your denouement. We want to get nerdy about it and nerd out about it. And
yes.
And so much of storytelling today is collaborative, it's open-ended, but it's optimistic, and there's a trajectory of hope. And you're asking your users to be part of the ending, to write the ending. And it's okay to not have a perfect bow wrapper story ending, even in marketing, because reality isn't perfect. And I think sometimes those stories are better because they're just human and real.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't have said that, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, definitely. And I think one of the biggest things from Eddie that struck me was how comfortable people are with flaws when you let them know, you know, how much everybody relates to something flawed.
Yeah.
And whereas, you know, I think when I was learning storytelling, it did have to have the bow on it, and it did have to be perfect. The characters didn't have to be perfect, but they had to be very black or white. Like, it was almost like you had to tell people how to feel. And I think we've really evolved away from that. And I'm not talking about how that it would have to be that way in long form journalism, but if in short stuff like blogs, you know, you would have to be told this is good, this is bad. And now it's okay for things to be complex. And to a certain point, to a certain extent, we're all more comfortable with things being complex, and with characters that are complex and products that are complex and possibly flawed.
Well said. See, you had a great answer. I think that's exactly where I've evolved in my sort of, you know, because similar background to yours, where I've evolved, that the best stories are they're imperfect, and they don't have to be complete. And it's okay to just say, hey, we don't know, but this is where we think it could go. What do you think? And then now you're inviting, you know, people to the conversation and to participate in the story. And that's what's so great about the Eddie the Terrible story, which I love. I'm more a fan of the flawed and the real, because it is honest. It's just honest.
Yeah.
You know.
And you know, the other thing now I just won't shut up. The other thing I think I learned about stories was that, and I learned this from working with the amazing people that I work with.
Yeah.
And from, you know, I've been in shelters for 20 years, and from working with the amazing animals that I've worked with. And that is that the story doesn't start a lot of times where journalism school would or journalism or whatever would have you believe it starts. Eddie's story never started in abuse. We never mentioned anything about that it started with him winding up at the shelter. And I see a lot of great, you know, where everybody's always looking for farther back cause, that you can start after an event. You can start, you know, the story can pick up at any point in time. You don't have to need a full backstory if the action is compelling enough.
Such a great point. Start in the middle, and you can start in the middle. You don't need the beginning. You don't have to go back to the beginning. and you can tell of the larger story. You can focus on a micro story within that. And I love that. And something tells me that Eddie's going to have probably more stories. And I don't know, you mentioned he's a therapy dog, which that's such an ironic, beautiful, wonderful thing. There's a story in that.
It is. There is actually on our blog, and I have to plug our blog, HSSV. Yes, it's if you go to hssv.org is our website, and there's a link to the blog at the bottom of the page, and there is actually an Eddie follow-up where you can see him with his parents, his owners, and he is now a certified therapy dog. And we talked about redemption a little bit before, but also the transformative power of love. So again, hssv.org, H is in humane, S is in society, S is in silicon, V is in valley.org. And the link to the blog's at the bottom, and you can completely see where Eddie has gone from there.
I love it. I love it. I hope we have some more Eddie stories, or at least some positive, if not jerky dogs or jerky animals, some positive outcomes. Some positive outcomes where you're giving somebody, an animal, a second chance, and they'll surprise you. And look at Eddie the Turtle. Yeah. He's now a certified therapy dog. So, he
is a certified therapy dog, and his owners could not love him more. And it's just amazing. So
fantastic. Yep. Finnegan, you are a delight to talk to. Other than the blog, a Twitter handle, a place where they can read more, find out more about the work that you're doing at the Humane Society?
Our Facebook, which is, I believe it is facebook.com/Humane Society SV, Silicon Valley. And then our Twitter handle is again HSSV, so Humane Society Silicon Valley, just the initials there. You can always find us there. There's links to all of our social media on our website. So
awesome.
Come in, check us out. If you're in the area, come hang out and pat a dog or meet a cat. You can just stop in and say hello.
Absolutely. I'm going to do that now. I'm inspired to go do that. And I love dogs, so you already had me there. So
yeah, and our shelter doesn't look like a traditional shelter, so people tend to be really happy and comfortable when they come in because we don't have cages or anything. So we have rooms and suites and everything. Yeah. So we don't have like bars. It's not a doggy jail. It's pretty cool.
I love that. I love that. All you need, because I'm in Silicon Valley, we have this kind of image. I'm in San Jose too. I'm just near you. It's like the only thing better might be if you had Wi-Fi and you combined it with like a coffee bar, and there you go.
We actually had a snack bar. We actually, and our pet store sells snacks, but we actually have a snack. You can buy sandwiches and go sit out in our little courtyard and eat out there. And we do have public Wi-Fi access. So
she got it covered.
Hard to believe. Yeah, we do. We're an animal community center because we also have like a dog park, and we have pet training classes and a groomer and vaccines. So we've got all this cool stuff going on here that kind of would make you want to be here. It's pretty awesome.
That's very awesome. So. The bigger story animal community. So please, folks, check out hssv.org, and please stop by. Finnegan, it is such a delight to talk to you and to a fellow storyteller. So I'm getting my geek on. I'm getting my storytelling geek on today. Yes,
exactly. My geek horns. I got to get my geek horns out before I go back to my cube.
And bonus round.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a great pleasure. So we'll chat with you soon. Take care, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.